Now, the ANC has described the Democratic Alliance's motion of no confidence in Gauteng Premier David Makhura as desperate. The DA in the provincial legislature blames Makhura for the 144 life Esidimeni patients who lost their lives after being moved to unlicensed NGOs. The motion will be tabled on the 15th of this month. To discuss this further, let's now chat to the ANC's Gauteng Provincial Secretary, Hope Papo. Hope, good to see you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Leah.
Yeah, so, all right, you basically are saying that this is just a massive political move by the DA, which it is. I mean, we know politics. But do you think that the reason they have given for this motion this time around is actually valid?
The reason is ridiculous, it's frivolous, because Professor Malhapuru Makhura came with a report. That report was followed almost to the latter. There will be a few things which the provincial government did not implement. Professor Makhura did not blame the Premier on anything relating to life Esidimeni. The arbitration, which basically was done as part of the follow-up on Professor Makhura's report, also doesn't blame the Premier on any matter. So their motion has nothing to do with life Esidimeni, because part of the program is to deal with vulnerable people within the health system and within government. It's not only mental patients, also children, also older people. There's a program in the provincial government to focus attention on the issues of vulnerable people. Now, this motion basically flies in the face of the report of Professor Makhura, flies in the face of Judge Moseneke's report. There's no factual basis of this motion. It's just a gimmick which we reject with contempt, and that motion will be defeated by all ANC members and in the legislature. And we add other political parties not to be hoodwinked by the DA in this motion.
Let's go back to the arbitration on the life Esidimeni tragedy. When David Makhura was speaking, the Premier, he actually did accept accountability, and he said that as the head of the provincial government, the buck stops with him. Having said that, in a way, do you not think that is enough reason for him to either back away from the position and say, I made a mistake, this should never have happened under my watch, but it did. So with the DA now filing this motion of no confidence against him, perhaps it's forcing his hand. It's saying, I'm going to take responsibility, this shouldn't have happened, and I'm going to walk away. So now they're going to force him to do that. I mean, I'm taking another angle. What do you think?
The DA knows very well that the Premier acted. The former MEC for Health resigned. There was no call, long stories that the MEC should resign. The Premier was firm on that matter. Fortunately, the MEC herself recognized that it's a problem which happened in her department. The Premier implemented almost all the recommendations and decisions of Professor Makhura as a health ombudsman. The arbitration was held. The issue of commitment to actually compensate the families is on the table. So I would have understood if Professor Makhura came with a report, the Premier did nothing on the report, there was no arbitration, and in both reports there is no mention where there's culpability by the Premier. Yeah. So the basis of this motion is just a game which the DA is playing. And we understand there will be elections next year, but I think DA must also take people of Gauteng more seriously than they're actually doing. That's why we're saying other parties must also support the ANC, which has a majority in the legislature, in rejecting this motion.
Yeah, it's sad that politics is being drawn into this, because at the end of the day, it's almost like the 144 lives which we've been hearing about, and that was a very unfortunate and sad and unnecessary loss of life. The reality is it did happen under the ANC's watch. It did happen under the administration when the ANC was in charge and David Makhura was the Premier. And I know that we had the health MEC resigning, but somehow maybe that isn't good enough.
But you see, the thing is, we should not work on the basis of attitude. The report of the judge itself, it's a very, very important. If you read what the judge said around the Premier, the MEC for Finance, the current MEC for Health, that is the basis on which we are operating. We can't operate on whims. And therefore, DA we want to ask them, on what basis are they bringing this motion? Because Judge Moseneke did not say, the Premier admitted as a political head, but Judge Moseneke did not blame the Premier for life Esidimeni.
Yeah.
It's the DA and the opposition, we understand, but we cannot accept a situation where DA wants to have its cake and eat it. Whose mandate are they operating from? Do they have the mandate of the families?
Well, I mean, I'll read their reasons behind it. They're saying, and I'm quoting the provincial leader, John Moody, saying that the ethical and moral accountability for 144 deaths and the suffering of thousands more lies squarely on the shoulders of Premier David Makhura. It cannot be business as usual for the Premier, who is ultimately responsible for a gross miscarriage of leadership by his provincial government. Moody said Makhura did not care enough to establish the facts of the Esidimeni saga. Those are the reasons. And do you not think they're strong enough?
It's funny because the agreement to actually work, ask Professor Makhura, was a decision by the Premier and the Minister of Health. And also the former MEC herself was part of that decision. But it's quite funny. The Premier is not blamed in any report, but DA then wants to try and take a high horse. They have a member of parliament who used to work in the NPA who was charged. And DA never asked that member to resign in parliament. Linili, the one who was responsible for justice and correctional services in parliament. She was charged and remained an MP. Now they have a Premier who was not charged accused by any report. Premier took political responsibility and commitment to implement decisions which were actually in Professor Makhura's report and the Deputy Judge President's report. And then they are now coming with this frivolous, ridiculous motion.
Yeah. Let's just wrap it up. This is happening on the 15th of May.
Yes.
What discussions, if any, will the ANC be having in the run-up to this?
We are defeating that frivolous, ridiculous motion. It will be outvoted, that motion, by ANC members of the provincial legislature. Okay. There's no debate about it. It's a frivolous motion, and we call on other parties in the legislature to reject this attempt by the DA to actually basically insult the intelligence.
Okay, leave it there. Thank you. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us here on the program. That was Hope Papo, who is the ANC's Gauteng Provincial Secretary, talking about the DA's motion of no confidence in Gauteng Premier David Makhura over the life Esidimeni tragedy. This is expected to take place on the 15th of May. We take a break. The DA are our guests after this. Do stay tuned.